Over the last few years, I've deduced, well, I haven't deuced myself, but I've come to the conclusion that SnakeByte controllers really don't bite. In fact, for the price point, as they're generally sub $80 Xbox and PC controllers, they actually kick a good amount of rump, as they are anti-stick drift with those Hall Effect thumbstick modules. Granted, you can still have a recentering spring go out on you, but that's rather rare. But you do have 5 years of warranty coverage, which is even more rare in the controller world. In this video, I'm going to be passing out a couple of Game Pass subscriptions like candy, and we're going to be reviewing the 2 latest and greatest models from SnakeByte, the Base X and the RGB X, which share a lot of the same features, but this one has RGB lighting, of course. And let's see what makes these gamepads special. Let's get it. A quick disclaimer for my audience, the Stallions and Stallionettes, these controllers were sent for review, but this is going to be an honest, comprehensive review. I haven't been paid or told to say anything about them, so if there's any cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement, you're going to hear about it, so these companies make better products over time. So unfortunately, it's worth mentioning right here, right now, right off Jump Street, right in the beginning of the video, that it looks like SnakeByte and Amazon might have had a little bit of falling out and don't look like they're dating anymore. There's only one model that is currently sold in Jeff Bezos' back door, which is the Pro X, the highest end, most expensive flagship controller from SnakeByte, currently at $80 US. However, it's been slashed down to 60, which means it's probably not selling well, considering this sale has been ongoing for quite some time and we're not near a holiday or anything, and the reviews not great at all at 3.3 out of 5 stars. But the controllers that we're looking at today on the manufacturer's website is going to be the Base X and the RGB X, skipping over the Pro X, which we've already reviewed the white version right over here. And all these ones from this invisible tear line down, I would just steer a clear of. They're a little bit older versions, a little bit, they're lackluster in the feature set for sure. Doing a little bit of light conversion, we can see that this is a $37 US controller currently in its white and black variant. Personally, I think the white looks more handsome. But what's impressive here is going to be the price point, as these are $37 controllers that come with magnetic Hall Effect thumbstick modules. Very unlikely to get stick drift for you. They do include a 3.5mm headphone jack. Seems silly to mention as a feature, but more and more controllers are ditching that. And these are wired, which needs mentioned immediately. Some people swear by going wired. I am not one of those gamers. Keep in mind, if input lag or delay is your whole shtick for going wired, in every controller review that I conduct, I do measure the input lag or delay wired, wireless with a 2.4 gigahertz dongle, Bluetooth if that mode is available. Then I try and overclock and measure all those methods again. But you get 5 years of warranty coverage, Hall Effect sticks, and a wired $35 controller. There's the summary for you right there. And if you want to spend a few more ducats, you can get the additional feature of RGB lighting, which I personally would disable, which I don't think looks the best, to be honest. I think it's implemented in a pretty tacky, cheap, lackluster, not very handsome way, and you can dim or disable it. That's not going to do anything for saving battery life because this is a wired always controller, but at least you won't have to stare at that ugly ass feature. But why not just save the few extra bucks and get the version without RGB, considering that is the only feature difference. As for the packaging included accessories, you do have 2 clear wafer stickers on the top that will need sliced. The only difference in the packaging is going to be blue on the RGBX, but you do have this little cloth grab string at the top, a little bit of lime green branding, and the license stamp and sigil, as these are official Xbox products. And they're of course going to flex about their warranty, because why not? That's longer than any of its competitors. Right up top, you are going to have a very long, but unfortunately very thick, not very lightweight or flexible rubber USB-C cable with no dust covers, but luckily it does have a Velcro tie back. Little pull tab, hard to do one-handed, impossible to do one-handed. Controller slips out of a plastic bag, keeping it free of dust and debris, and immediately I have some complaints, but we'll set you down and get to bashing you in just a second. Also, it is extremely easy to miss the Game Pass trial placard, as well as your instruction manual, all your documentation, because it's shoved in the side of the box like that. Really stupid. You know what else is kind of dumb is the fact that Game Pass has raised its price 2 or 3 times since I've been subscribed, but here's a free trial for a couple of y'all. Just type them in, plug them in, jank them up, john them down. Minimal documentation. This is not an instruction manual by any means. Kind of a quick start guide, if you even want to call it that. Just a couple of pictures. Hey, plug the cable into the USB port, shove the other end to the suck hole of your console or PC. Is that how controllers work? As for the cosmetics or appearance on these 2 gamepads I have sitting decadently between my legs, I'm going to go ahead and punch out like an AR right in front of my face and talk about the cosmetics one after another.
Look at the target.
Process.
Friend foe.
The smoked one looks okay when it's off. However, the RGB when it's turned on looks terrible, absolutely horrendous. I would just disable it, not to save battery life, but just because it looks like shit. There is no battery life, it's a wired controller. But this funky porous plastic has a really weird pattern. It almost looks like there's some kind of a sticker over it. Makes it look really funky, and in combination with these extremely glossy, multicolored buttons, which are a part spin special, reused from every PDP and PowerA controller over the last 10 years. The best thing this controller's got going for it in the cosmetics department's going to be around backside with the rumper tuchus, as there is no sticker. It's just etched all the regulatory information on the back, which I think looks way better. Also, you can kind of see the PCB printed circuit board through there, which looks dope, but the front turns me off. So I like what she looks like from the back, but then you flip her around front and I get turned off. And this tiny Xbox jewel, which is physically very small, but also has a really weird hump on it and isn't really white. It's kind of an eggshell warmer white. Seeing through the camera lens versus putting eyes on these controllers, it is a different story, and the story's ugly, like a 4 out of 10 for me. As for the comfort, these are the same shape and shell design, one from the other, so I'm gonna grab one and be talking about both of them. The plastics used are horrendous in both this translucent or smoked version as well as the base version without RGB. The best way to describe it, if you've ever used chalk when lifting, it feels like, or just being a kid drawing chalk on the sidewalk, it feels like you have chalk on your hands. There's this very gritty, almost grainy sand-like material, which is probably one of the worst plastics that I've ever made contact with my skin. So fucking terrible. Also, the ergonomic shape and shell design isn't great. There is no grip to speak of, no dots, no stippling, no rubberized grips, no change in plastics around the haunches or grips. This is not a very comfortable controller. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. As for the perceived build quality, this controller puts the whore in horrendous, as this thing just, there's no big panel gap where the front faceplate and rear shell meet, and if you do have an issue, there is 8 Phillips or cross tips in the back, although you do have that 5-year of warranty coverage, so you can probably just take it up at the manufacturer. But the plastics used feel incredibly, wow, hollow, huh? It's like there's nothing in there, the guts be loose. And we have to look at this objectively. This is a $35 controller. Well, this is the RGB one, but we'll, hold on. Hi, I'm the $35 version with magnetic Hall effect thumbsticks and a 5-year warranty. Corners are going to be cut. In fact, they would be disqualified on the racetrack because they've cut so many corners in the build quality. I wouldn't trust this with a drop onto a hard floor or even carpet. The D-pad or direction buttons aren't mentioned as anything special, and they are still a typical membrane. You have a rubber or silicone plunger underneath this front faceplate, but these do feel phenomenal. In fact, they are actually one of my favorite components of this controller, and I was pleasantly surprised because even though this is a separated D-pad with 4 distinct buttons, you would think that roll-offs or diagonals would be a real chore, real difficult, but it's actually quite easy. Also, you get a nice tactile click that you feel even if you're wearing a headset and can't actually hear it, and the surface plastics used actually feel phenomenal. I wish the rest of the controller was wrapped in such. It's also not obnoxiously loud. I have no complaints here. I'm gonna give the D-pad a 7.5 out of the 10. Actually, I can't stop doing that. It's very satisfying. Go ahead and give it an 8. It deserves it. But where I'm gonna go ahead and chip it down, knock it down a couple of pegs, because it's getting a little too high and mighty on the pedestal, is going to be the face or action buttons. Cosmetically, they are hyper gloss, so they are gonna collect fingerprints and micro scratches like nobody's business. Also, they are multicolored, looking very tacky, extremely cheap in my opinion. Should have been blacked out on this version, whited out or light gray on this version. Furthermore than that, these feel worse than a stock Xbox or PlayStation controller. They do have the size and spacing of Xbox buttons. I've covered I don't like the round buttons of the Xbox. I prefer the little bit flatter design that the PlayStation rocks. But these feel incredibly hollow and tinny. Granted, they do have a pretty short actuation, about under a millimeter, I would say, but they do not feel or sound the best, and they look like hot ass as well. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 4 out of 10. And as for the accessory button suite, I'm getting ready to play the limbo. How low can you go, Kevin? How low of a score can you give the accessory button suite? I can give it a 2. I could technically give it a 1, but this has a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, which I do appreciate because that's becoming more of a relic. Granted, I don't give a shit about that, but a lot of gamers still go wired. But what I do care about is going to be this accessory button suite over here, where you have the pause option and share buttons so small that I can literally engulf all of them with my thumbs, and I have pretty small meat hammers. If you got a big old bunch of bananas, you are fucked. Also, this little jewel, which is the Xbox home button, is a lot smaller than any other home button I've ever seen. I don't know if that really transfers over in video? Of course it doesn't, because I'm not comparing it to anything. Hold on. Oh yeah, perfect. We're all visual learners and whatnot, but the actual diameter of that jewel is a lot smaller than any controller I've ever seen, comparing it to this Turtle Beach with this generic PDP/PowerA/EOS/ I can keep going little jewel. But this one's hella small, which can make it kind of hard to hit, and I think it looks pretty goddamn stinky as well, as it isn't really white. It's kind of a vanilla eggshell warm white, and then on the white version where it should be white, it's black. As for the thumbsticks, both versions do have anti-friction rings, so you're going to glide along that smooth plastic when you're at full lock. The rubber silicone compound used is actually really grippy and also doesn't feel like it's going to break down very quickly over time, striking a perfect balance between durability and grip. Clicking down R3 and L3 feels quite secure. You do have anti-friction rings, and the size, diameter of these bad boys, they feel large, bigger than most standard thumbsticks, but that's also because there's a little dish, a perfect little resting point to cup the tip of your thumb. Feels great. Now, I personally am not going to be putting KontrolFreeks on this troller, maybe on the right side to add a little bit more height, but I've got no issues with the grip offered. But as for compatibility, let's start with the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Doesn't want to slide on there, I tell ya. This is the PlayStation 4 and 5 caps. No sir, no ma'am, go ahead and lemon juice your clam. So that just solidifies my statement a second ago that these are larger thumbsticks diameter-wise than pretty much anything on the market. These are designed for the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, stupid naming convention because it's just their standard full-size controller. This is the PlayStation 4 and 5 caps. This is the Xbox One and Series KontrolFreeks. All of them are too taut and would not slide onto these thumbsticks. Now, the PlayStation ones you probably could force on, but you are at risk of damaging these caps. Over here in Gamepad Tester, and one thing I like to see is that this is recognized as an Xbox One controller, which means she's in X input mode. Won't have to do any tomfoolery inside of REWAs or any such thing. Let's go ahead and rotate these thumbsticks in a circle and see what we're looking at. And what we are looking at is perfectly calibrated Hall effect thumbstick modules that snap back to a resting value of 0.0002 every time you take your little meaty hammers off the thumbsticks. Now, when I activate the circularity test, we're going to get a little bit more data here. Perfect. As we can see, no weird inner or outer dead zone. Also very even, except for down right on the left analog stick, which I didn't experience anything in game where my character wasn't backing up at a proper speed, but worth noting. But one thing I will note for these thumbsticks as somebody that has tested hundreds, no, that's actually way too conservative. These are a lot more smooth, where instead of being a little bit jittery, where you can see the movement, it almost looks like panning the mouse across a 60 hertz monitor, and you can kind of watch the cursor stutter or skip a little bit, and then you're on 120, 144 hertz monitor, and it's a lot more fluid and smooth, as where these have that fluid, smooth motion that you don't get with very many Hall effect thumbstick modules. And that's one of the things that I've preferred with potentiometer thumbstick modules, even though they are susceptible to getting stick drift, is that they're usually a lot more smooth, and your inputs are a lot more linear and evenly received from the PC or console, whatever the hell. Yeah, these are sick. As I'm lurking in the darkness, cloaked in RGB, I'm about to test the thumbsticks in Gamepad Tester, but can we take a moment to look at how stupid and silly and wacky this RGB looks? Tacky as shit. It looks a little better on camera because it's more diffused. However, you can clearly see 4 dots just staring you in the face. Now, as a dude that grew up in the 90s, that was super hot. The rope lights around the outside of the room, I had that while I had my feet kicked up on the beanbag chair, downloading a bunch of Lil Jon, the East Side Boys on Kazaa and LimeWire. You know, you were there. Had the spiked hair, pipe jeans, Osiris's stuffed with the socks. I feel like not all that happened at once. That was kind of like my whole childhood just summarized there, all the styles and fads. Let's test these thumbsticks, shall we? Do you ever feel like a hollow, tinny, empty shell of a man? That's what these bumpers say to itself when it's staring in the mirror, as they have the hollowest, clackiest, there's nothing inside of this controller sound I've ever heard in my entire life. Go ahead and cut the background music, DJ. It's good to see Toys R Us is back in business because that was a major part of my childhood. In all seriousness, there is no grip or stippling up here, although the plastics used are a lot better than the front faceplate, rear shell, basically all the rest of the controller that makes contact with your hand, as it's matte and has a nice little amount of grip on it. Actually feels pretty soft, supple, like this up here. But I don't like the way it sounds or feels when you actuate it, although the pressure is evenly dispensed to where if you press it over here on the hinge or with the meat of your finger, it's about the same pressure, but it just sounds terrible, doesn't feel great. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10. because you'll never win when bumping people off with them bumpers. As for the trigs, they do have a little bit of dots or stippling up here, but this is actually slicker than the undibbly dotted pattern over here on the bumpers and the side of the trigger, so I guess they could have foregone that. Good range of motion, good resistance, no trigger lock or stop system. There's 2 triggers up here, and they feel like stalkers on a regular controller that you've used. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 4 out of 10. Input lag or delay is gonna be a pretty short section because we don't have to measure multiple means of connectivity, a 2.4 gigahertz dongle, Bluetooth, hibbity-bibbity. It's all just gonna be tethered with a USB-C cable, and as you can see, it's ready to get down to business.
Can we get down to business?
Because it's already in X input mode, as I'm spinning in a circle, you're gonna see 4 milliseconds across the board. Yes, indeedy, very consistent, 3.95 average. Minimum, maximum, pretty damn close to each other. Jitter, not very high either. Clear as day at 250 hertz polling rate. I'd like to see a couple more. Going clockwise this time instead of counterclockwise to see if that makes it does not. Yep, perfect. Consistent as the day she was born. I love it. 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay, completely acceptable. Not as good as 2 or 1, but we'll see if the overclocking world can unlock our tukuses in that department. But first, we're gonna see what Gamepad LA has to say on the topic. Let's do a 2000 sample test. Go ahead and spin that left stick in a circle without stopping. It is gonna take a little while to fill up that bar because we're only at 250 hertz here. X input and Gamepad LA have confirmed with each other, and I've also consulted with them around the round table, and we're in agreement here. Over here in the Lord of Mice overclocking program with this drop down, go ahead and select all so you can see what's going on. Expand this. If I'm going a little bit fast, I do have an overclocking guide, although that's looking long in the tooth now. That bitch is like 2 years old. That stuff has changed for sure. The Lord of Mice overclocking program has gone through multiple updates. Other things have changed. I should probably do an updated video. Also for channel health, that video has a cockload of views as well. Cockle-doodle-doo. How do you do? We are recognized as an Xbox gaming device, not overclock, stock clock, 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay. It's in X input mode. All that is correct. Let's overclock this son of a bee and don't bang your freaking knee. Install service. If you're wondering why I don't overclock to 8000, I did cover that topic amongst several others in my recent, well, a couple months ago now, debunking controller myths or rumors video. So we're gonna go ahead and unplug, replug that same Xbox gaming device, overclocked, 1000 hertz, around 1 millisecond of input lag or delay. Probably not, but we'll see. No, not a damn bit of difference because this bad boy is going to be polling rate locked at the board as it is a licensed Xbox controller, which first party and usually even the third party Johns are locked down. As we're on the PlayStation side of the house or some of the super generic gamepads, you can overclock the titty nips out of to get them around 1 millisecond of input lag or the delay, as in you're due for a good lay, my friend. As for the pros, cons, and verdict, instead of bouncing back and forth, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, I'm just going to get down to business with the verdict. Do I recommend this controller at the price? And the simple answer is going to be no. As recently, GameSir has been doing the limbo with how low can you go with the pricing on budget entry-level Xbox and PC controllers, which is a segment that SnakeByte's also trying to take a bite out of and pump some venom into. And while the controllers are good and I like what they're doing here, this is virtually the same exact controller as the Nova and Nova Lite, which are a wireless version or variant of basically this exact gamepad, but with better feeling plastics and an overall better presentation. Not to mention they are wireless, which opens up the world of converters or adapters so you can use one controller to play on Xbox, PlayStation, although restricted to PS4 games, and Switch, of course, and PC. So with the Nova and Nova Lite existing, although I will say that has made the GameSir's lineup even more confusing. That is why this video exists, going over the model lineup, kind of a buyer's guide. Well, not kind of, that's exactly what that is a buyer's guide. With those controllers existing and having came out just before these wired variants, which are only a couple of shekels cheaper, but you are now tethered or wired. And overall, if we're looking at each part and component, things like thumbsticks, D-pad, face buttons, bumpers, triggers, the Nova also has rear buttons. The SnakeBytes do not. So unfortunately, I can't recommend picking up these gamepads because I personally would rather get the Nova for a couple bucks more and have all that platform compatibility and be able to go wireless and have rear buttons. And if you do have a hard-on for SnakeByte, maybe you have an affinity for that particular model, or that make, I should say, then check out the Gamepad Pro X, as I think that's more appealing. And now that that has been slashed from $80, the price that it was when I tested it when it was released, down to $60, what it currently is on Amazon, that is a more appealing gamepad, but it's still wired, so that's something you have to take into account. Both the SnakeByte controllers are linked in the description below, as well as the Gamepad Pro X review, because you might want to check that out. And I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Go ahead and ravage the comment section with controller talk. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more stallions and stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.